This week's demotivational poster has to be the most widely circulated one I know of for atheism. I see it all the time, especially on Facebook. It is titled Atheism, with the caption, "Good enough for these idiots." Yet despite the overwhelming presence of sarcasm, some people online, who are literate in the fine art of sarcasm, take great offense over the image, arguing earnestly that it is the religious people who are idiots, and these men aren't idiots at all. But yeah, we knew that already. That's where the clever humor of the image is lurking, waiting for you to finally find it. But just who are these quote-unquote idiots? Well, starting in the top left, we have the incredibly talented author of countless classic novels and notorious wife collector, Ernest Hemingway. Next is the string bean giant, with a crazy wife and shocking resemblance to Daniel Day-Lewis, but you know him as the Emancipator Proclaimer, Abraham Lincoln. Moving on to an astrophysicist, astronomer, cosmologist, and rocker of turtlenecks everywhere, Carl Sagan. Next is another famous author with multiple names and a mustache made of steel wool. But surely you only know him for the adventures of Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. He is none other than Mark Twain. Next we have a founding father, enlightenment leader, slave owner, and a whole bunch of other things this overachiever is credited for, Thomas Jefferson. And the only person even more multi-talented than Jefferson would have to be the pleasantly plump inventor and French ladies' man Benjamin Franklin. Moving on to our sexy German theoretical physicist, who discovered E equals mc squared and the general theory of relativity, but unfortunately not hair conditioner, Albert Einstein. And last but certainly not least, the man who traveled to some remote islands, hung out with some weird animals, and grew a long beard and then wrote a book about it, the founder of biological evolution himself, Charles Darwin. Okay, enough of that creepy game show host voice nonsense. All these men are obviously very intelligent, but this image is telling us that they're also atheists. As always, we see atheists trying to associate themselves with intelligent people in an appeal to authority sort of way to make their position more credible. But let us take a closer look at this image, shall we? The first man shown is Ernest Hemingway. Yet it does seem odd to me that a notable fictional writer would be used to convey the intelligence of atheism. After all, I can find countless other fictional writers that have contributed to literature who are theists. Perhaps the creator of this image had just read The Old Man and the Sea and was caught up in some whimsical admiration for Hemingway. Regardless, here we have our first atheist. The next man in the image is Abraham Lincoln, and this is where things get weird because Lincoln was clearly Christian with a great understanding of the Bible. He has been quoted saying that his Bible was the best cure for the blues, and this great book is the best gift God has given to man. He has even quoted scripture many times in his speeches, the most notable within the Emancipation Proclamation, in which he quoted Exodus 6:5. So why do people think Lincoln is an atheist? Well, many pro-atheism websites contain quotes from Lincoln that either can't be sourced, are taken out of context, or display Lincoln's skepticism for organized religion. Unfortunately, the skepticism of organized religion has led people to believe he was an atheist. Yet all one must do is read any of Lincoln's works in full context or read testimonies from those close to Lincoln to see that he was anything but an atheist, as atheism is defined. Though many historians debate what his official position was since it fluctuated during his life, at the end of the day, he may have been a deist or a skeptical theist, but he was most certainly not an atheist. This puts our score at one atheist and one theist, maybe deist. Next in our image is Carl Sagan, who is unfortunately not an atheist as well. He once said, "An atheist is someone who is certain that God does not exist, someone who has compelling evidence against the existence of God. I know of no such compelling evidence. Because God can be relegated to remote times and places and to ultimate causes, we would have to know a great deal more about the universe than we do now to be sure that no such God exists. To be certain of the existence of God and to be certain of the non-existence of God seem to me to be the confident extremes in a subject so riddled with doubt and uncertainty as to inspire very little confidence indeed." This would make Carl Sagan a strong agnostic. Some even argue he was a borderline deist, but he certainly was not an atheist. Our score now stands at one atheist, one theist, and one agnostic. Next is Mark Twain, whom many argue is atheist and others argue a deist. Though I personally believe him to be a deist, it's not so clear-cut. But hey, I'm feeling generous. Since atheism isn't looking too good right now, I'm going to give you this one and say Twain was an atheist. This puts atheism in the lead with 2. But now we come to Thomas Jefferson, a clear and undeniable deist. Same situation for Benjamin Franklin and Albert Einstein, who were also deists. And for those of you who don't know what a deist is, it is someone who believes that reason and observation of nature are sufficient means by which to demonstrate the existence of a creator God, but deny that this God has any vested personal interest in humans and deny that religion has any authority on the subject. So a deist may be considered anti-religion, but they are certainly not atheists since they believe in a creator God. In fact, one can find many quotes from Franklin and Einstein speaking of God. This now leaves the score at atheists 2, agnostics 1, deists 3, and theists 1. Things aren't looking too good for the atheists. Lastly, we have Charles Darwin, the man every atheist knows and loves. Though he was a Christian for much of his life, he eventually turned away from his faith. Some argue Darwin recanted on his deathbed, but this has been denied by his family. But does that make him an atheist? Certainly not, and in 1871 Darwin wrote the following: "In my most extreme fluctuations, I have never been an atheist in the sense of denying the existence of a God. I think that generally, and more as I grow older, but not always, that an agnostic would be the more correct description of my state of mind." That would make Darwin a self-proclaimed agnostic. It would also make our final score atheists 2, agnostics 2, deists 3, and theists 1. Assuming Twain is an atheist, this means that the creator of the image only got 2 out of 8 people identified correctly as atheists, which is ironic for an image trying to convey the intelligence of atheists. And it is even further ironic that the 2 atheists would be not the physicist, not the cosmologist, not the inventor, not the presidents, not even the biologist, but the 2 novelists. That's just embarrassing. But for sake of argument, let's hypothetically say all 8 of these men are genuine atheists. Does it really prove atheism is for smart people? I mean, I could make a similar image with comparable Christians on it. Like, for example, instead of Ernest Hemingway and Mark Twain, I'll put in other literary geniuses such as C.S. Lewis and R.C. Sproul. Instead of political figures Abraham Lincoln, Ben Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson, I'll put in George Washington, Theodore Roosevelt, and John F. Kennedy. For our cosmologist Carl Sagan, I'll put in Dr. Frank Jennings Tipler. For our physicist Albert Einstein, I'll put in Dr. Charles Hard Towns. And for our biologist, I'll put in Gregor Mendel, the father of genetics. And there you have it. Christianity, good enough for these idiots. See, the creator of this image made the mistake of polarizing the issue, creating 2 false alternatives of atheism versus Christianity, while ignoring all other possible positions one may take. Those men who were critics of Christianity were unfortunately lumped in with atheists for merely not being Christian. But not being a Christian does not equate to being an atheist, as has been shown. Furthermore, simply wrangling up a bunch of well-respected historical figures to support the legitimacy of your cause is arguably the tactic of appealing to authority, as in, hey, these guys are smart, they share my position, therefore my position is better than yours. But this doesn't prove anything, as I can do the same thing for Christians. So this demotivational poster fails pretty hard, yet I still see it everywhere. But hey, I won't stop you from propagating it. It only shows how poorly you know your history and lessens the credibility of the self-proclaimed intelligence atheists hold on to so dearly.